Welcome back, college football. Welcome back, guys, to another North to South show. What a day it was yesterday. What a day it was in college football. What a day to be alive, because no matter what team you were a fan of, if you just turned into any college football game yesterday, you are going to have a great time, because I tell you, there were some amazing games yesterday. And it wasn't just the blockbuster ones. Like, we're not just talking about your Georgia Clemson game. We're not just talking about your Alabama Miami, your LSU UCLA, all those big time matchups, Penn State Wisconsin, even games like Oklahoma Tulane. If you tuned into that one at the end, very entertaining there. There were some great games all across college football yesterday. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning into the North to South show. What is going on, guys? Obviously, we talk SEC football, everything. And after our first SEC Saturday, we have lots to talk about. Because, as we know, many big things happened last night. Massive things. So, what I kind of got planned for you guys today, going to start off and talk about the Georgia Bulldogs. I don't need to explain to you what happened last night, but I want to talk about where this team is at and where this team is headed, because the Georgia Bulldogs right now are looking like they are one of the best teams in all the country, especially defensively, man. Like, can we just talk about this defense for a second? Actually, I'll hold and wait it for the actual segment, because that defense is absolutely terrifying. Then we're going to talk some Alabama football. They are looking also very dangerous. And it seems like each and every single year people have doubt in them. Obviously, all the turnover and everything that goes on with Alabama each and every single season. For some reason, and myself included, I'm not just trying to talk on other people. Like, this was me included. I did not know if Alabama, I had my own sense of doubt if Alabama was going to return to the same level of productivity that they were at last year. And judging by yesterday, this team is looking pretty dangerous this year. Alabama, it's just another year of Alabama football. And then finishing up, why I have the LSU jersey on is because we're going to talk some LSU Tigers football. Now, I know we're talking about the main teams in the SEC, or the teams that get the most media attention, and that's basically because they played the biggest games in the SEC all week. Like, if we talk about all the other teams that played in the SEC, they all played like FCS group of 5 teams, and Vanderbilt lost to an FCS team. Don't ask me how. It was brutal, absolutely brutal, that they lost to Eastern Tennessee State by 20 points. But, you know, it is what it is. So sit back, relax, guys. Drop me a hello in the comments. I love hearing from you guys all the time. Yes, S Holds 31. I also forgot about that game. I completely forgot about the games that we had on Thursday and Friday, because yes, that North Carolina Virginia Tech game, absolutely amazing there. And then even if you watch the Minnesota Ohio State game on Thursday, that was an unbelievable game as well. Minnesota hung around for a long time, and they were up at halftime. Just great college football games all across the board. So yes, thank you for reminding me about those games, because obviously Saturday was the big day, but we still had some amazing games prior to that. So guys, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And we are going to start off with talking about, let's give a warm welcome back to really Georgia sports in general, because Georgia sports, obviously you look at the Georgia Bulldogs and Atlanta's pro sports team. So we're looking at the Braves, we're looking at the Falcons, and we're looking at the Hawks and the Georgia Bulldogs. Atlanta sports fans have been through a lot for a long time, obviously going back to Super Bowl 51. I hate to bring this up, but I'm not going to mention the score because I'm sure you guys have heard enough of that. That whole thing happened. You had Georgia losing in the national championship to Alabama after getting a huge sack to force it to put Georgia in a very, very, very good spot to look like they're going to win the national championship. Obviously, then Tua just unloads the ball to Devontae Smith, and the rest is history. Then you go into, what else can we talk about? The Braves in the postseason last year, going up 3-1 against the LA Dodgers in looking to clinch a World Series spot, and they blow a 3-1 lead. Even the Hawks this year, like the Hawks, obviously they did a lot better than everyone expected them to, and they look like they're a team on the rise, but they were close at making the NBA championship too. Lots of heartbreak constantly going on in Georgia sports, and of course the Georgia Bulldogs are no exception to that. Obviously, I talked about the national championship, but just years and years and years and years, it seems like, for Georgia sports, that the Bulldogs have been the team that has had all the expectation that they're going to be the team, that this is their year. 2018, the SEC championship game came down to the wire, and obviously Jalen Hurts had other plans and screwed that up. 2019, they go up against LSU in the SEC championship. They get blown out there. 2020, they don't even make the SEC championship because they blow the game to Florida. Georgia has always seemed like they're that team that is one piece away or one step away from being one of the top tier teams in all of college football. They've always been a great team in college football the last like 5 or so years. They've always been one of the better teams, but they have yet to enter that elite tier range. And then we flash forward to 2021. The Georgia Bulldogs, they're getting their starting quarterback back. They get JT Daniels back. Just when it seems like everything is on the rise for Georgia, they go into the transfer portal. They grab a guy like Tyke Smith. They grab a guy like Darian Kendrick. They grab a guy like Eric Gilbert. Just as it seems like Georgia football is on the rise for this big Clemson game, it all crashes when you start dealing with injuries, when Eric Gilbert obviously leaves, when you have guys like Tyke Smith, I mentioned his name, he's out, when you have guys like Blaylock out, when you got guys like Darnell Washington out, when you got all these different guys out for Georgia. Carius Jackson also out. You had George Pickens out since the beginning of the offseason. He's been out for a while. It seemed like Georgia football at that point was going back down. After all the hype and excitement and everyone saying, oh, Georgia's missing way too many pieces in this game to be able to beat Clemson, Georgia goes out and plays one of the best defensive college football games that I have witnessed in some time. Like, this Georgia defense is something very, very special. And you start to get the sense. I hate overreacting because I did it last year with Mississippi State and started talking all about them and how good of a team that they were going to be for the rest of the season. And they finished out to be one of the worst teams in all the SEC last year. But this Georgia football team, you just feel like something's different. Offensively, now I want to talk about them offensively for a second. Georgia didn't score any points offensively. Clemson didn't score any points offensively. I mean, any touchdowns offensively. Obviously, they both kicked a field goal each, but that 7 points that Georgia did score was off of a Chris Smith touchdown pick six, and I watched that play live in this South Carolina student section. Unbelievable. I started going crazy. Our whole student section started going crazy, or everyone around me, because obviously we were all cheering for Georgia in that game. But this was a defensive game for Georgia, but I want to touch on the offense because JT Daniels in this game went 22 for 30, 135 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a QBR of 67.2. Now, I mentioned it before, all the weapons on the outside he was missing, but I want to say this about both teams. And for all of you guys listening, do not make your judgment on these offenses because of this game, because not every single week you are going to be going up against a top tier defense. And by top tier, I mean a top 3, top 2 defense in all of college football week in and week out. The defenses that we saw in this game that was played last Saturday night or last night, the amount of NFL talent, the amount of Sunday talent, the amount of guys that you are going to hear their names on Sundays in the upcoming years is immense. Like, these defenses were truly, this was one of the best defensive games. You saw some of the best defensive players that you may ever see in college football in this game. So please do not judge both of these offenses. I'm talking about Georgia's offense and I'm talking about Clemson's offense. Even though I hate Clemson and DJ, I'm not the biggest fan of, you cannot make your judgment based off of this game because they were going up against top tier defenses. Obviously, both of these teams are going to get into the rest of the schedule now. Both of them are going to go out and play against weaker defenses and really get their offenses kickstarted. But this was not the game to start out for on. If you're trying to establish an offense, this was not the game that you want week 1 on your schedule. But defensively, Georgia's defensive line, Georgia's really defensive line and linebackers, even their secondary, it was just a collective amazing game for Georgia. It's as simple as that. Nakobe Dean had one of the best games that I've seen. Like, let me pull up his stat sheet. He had 5 total tackles. He had 3 solos with 2 sacks and 2 tackles for losses. Nakobe Dean had an unbelievable game last night. He was absolutely amazing. On top of that, the other guys that got sacks, first of all, Georgia had 7 sacks in this game. 7 sacks against a Clemson offensive line, which obviously Clemson was bringing some new guys in that offensive line, but that's where the mismatch was in this game, and Georgia did more than take advantage of that. So you also had Adam Anderson taking advantage. He got a sack. You had Trayvon Walker getting a sack. You had Jordan Davis getting a sack. You had Nolan Smith getting a sack. And you had Jalen Carter getting a sack. All these guys were able to get to the quarterback, and they were constantly putting pressure on DJ Uiagalelei. And that's why you just take a look at his stat sheet real quick. DJ Uiagalelei in this game, 19 for 37, 178 yards, 1 interception, and a QBR of 36.7. That says a lot about where Georgia's going defensively because this is a good offense. 0 touchdowns scored. This team bent sometimes. Clemson was able to get into Georgia territory. Like I mentioned it before, Chris Smith's pick six, they were on the Georgia 30. They bent, but they didn't break. And obviously they didn't break because they took it back to the house for a pick six. And then even when Clemson kicked the field goal, even when Clemson was marching down into Georgia territory late in that game, Georgia was able to hold. So this defense has been showing immense talent. What's next for Georgia? What is next for Georgia? Because we look at their schedule. They play UAB next week. They play South Carolina. They go to Vanderbilt. They play Arkansas. And you really don't play another big-time matchup. First of all, you're not going to play anything to the same magnitude of playing Clemson. You don't play a big-time matchup till I say, what is that, week 6, October 9th, when you go to Auburn. Obviously, that's going to be a road test. It's not going to be easy, but if Georgia's able to keep playing like this team, regardless of what happens in the SEC championship, I don't see how this team doesn't make the SEC championship at this point. Again, I don't want to overreact too much because this team's only played one game. Anything can happen still, but what this team was able to do defensively is very, very promising. They're the best team in the SEC East, and I have a strong opinion that these guys are a serious contender to compete with Alabama. It's easy. Alabama 1, Georgia 2 in the AP right now. That's what I think it should be. The AP at this moment that I'm speaking right now, the AP poll has not come out yet, but I think it is so easy. Alabama 1, Georgia 2, and these two teams are going to be meeting up in the national championship in January or whatever, December 31st. That's the playoff. So they're going to be meeting up at some point in the playoff. It's as simple as that. That's where I think Georgia's at right now because this defense, man, even the offense is going to get going once they start getting their weapons back and everything like that. Once they start going up, they're going to play UAB next week. That's their week to finally score a touchdown offensively, first of all. And they're going to start getting JT Daniels going. First of all, the rushing game yesterday, Zamir White had an absolutely unbelievable game. Really, as a whole, the team had an unbelievable game. If you look at the rushing stats for Georgia compared to what Clemson had yesterday, I'm just going to pull them up right now. Georgia rushed for 121 yards. Clemson rushed for 2 yards. Again, shout out to Georgia's defensive line. 2 yards. You're telling me that the same Clemson team that was so high on Will Shipley and all the guys that they had coming in at the running back position and their offensive line, and that they were not only going to be a team to throw it this year, but also run the football. 2 rushing yards on the ground for Clemson. If that doesn't say something to you, I don't know what was. But this Georgia running back room, I touched on them a bit, 121 yards. That's decent going up against Clemson's defensive line, who after Georgia's defensive line, I think Clemson has the second best defensive line in all of college football. I think there's no question about it. So right now, my opinion on the Georgia Bulldogs, they are a top 2 team in the nation. Welcome back, Georgia football. Their fans deserve it. You guys all deserve it. It was a great win last night. And we will see how Georgia is able to do for the rest of the season in 2021 as they get prepared for what they hope for, what their fan base is hopeful, the year that they finally take home a natty. So Georgia football, congrats. Feel good about it. It was an amazing win. So that was our first segment, guys. I'll go back to the comments. Let me see what everyone is saying in here. We got someone saying, War Eagle, I feel bad for Vandy. I don't know if I feel bad for Vandy, but I do at the same time. I know they're good at baseball, but something's got to give. Like, we can't have this in the SEC, really. Like, losing to an FCS team in that magnitude, like, Vandy football has to be doing something. It has to be doing something better than this. I know it was Clark Lee's first game, but still, like, losing to East Tennessee State, in my opinion, that's kind of unacceptable. It really is. We got people saying, hopefully this is the year that Georgia finally wins it all. It would be good. I'm telling you, I'm not saying because I'm not a big Georgia guy at all. Obviously, I'm a Gamecocks fan, and saying that I like the Georgia Bulldogs does not happen. But I think it would be good for the diversity of the game to not have Alabama or Clemson win this year. Even if it's a team like Georgia, who has still been an elite team the last couple of years and everything like that, and they're always lingering around the top, I still think it would be good to not have Alabama or Clemson win the national championship just for the diversity and really the viewership, because the people that don't want to watch college football are the people that don't want to see Alabama win each and every single year. I'm so happy for Georgia. I'm so happy that Georgia won. I hate Clemson. I hate Clemson too. We can agree on something. By the way, check out this shirt behind me. I got to point this out because if it's not SEC football, can you really even call it football? I think that this is a great moment to point that out because SEC football, man. I mean, we got the 1 and 2 team in the country. Well, we should have the 1 or 2 team in the country. Even Texas A&M, like we talk about what Oklahoma did, only beating Tulane by 5 and basically almost losing that game. If you watch the last 2 minutes of that game, Oklahoma did not recover an onside kick, and Tulane had the ball back with 2 minutes left, down 5. They almost made that a huge, huge, huge upset, which Oklahoma is my national championship pick. I'm not even going to go around and act like I did not pick Oklahoma to win the national championship because I did. And then you look at Ohio State, who played a really close game against Minnesota, and Clemson lost. Texas A&M played a good game against Kent State. I think Texas A&M could squeak up into the 4 spot. I think the SEC could control 3 of the 4 teams in the top 4 in all of college football. Depending on how much the AP drops Oklahoma for their performance, I think you're probably going to have Alabama 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, and then I'd put Texas A&M 4. Why would you not put Texas A&M 4? What's a good reason to not put Texas A&M 4 after the performance that Oklahoma had? You're telling me that Oklahoma team who had all the talent that they had gives up 35 points to Tulane and only beats them by 5 points, and you're still going to consider them a top 4 team in the nation? I don't know, man. Everyone can finally remember Bryce Young was ranked higher than DJ and stop talking about DJ miles better than him. You are previewing perfectly into my next segment, so I'm not going to continue talking about that because what I was going to talk about right after we talked about the Georgia segment was Alabama, because I'd say the only team that impressed me even more than Georgia did yesterday was Alabama. And it makes no sense why I'm impressed by Alabama because nothing that they've done is new to college football or new to things that I've seen from Alabama, because Alabama has been the dynasty in college football the last however many years that Nick Saban's been there. There's no question about it. Everyone knows that Alabama is the dynasty in college football. So why am I shocked? Why am I constantly being reminded that Alabama, and why does the nation have to constantly be reminded that Alabama is still the best team in college football? I doubted them. I'm not saying that I was going out here saying that they were going to lose to Miami and stuff like that, but I was not sure about how Alabama was going to rebound after losing all the pieces that they did last year. Now, I ranked Bryce Young my 3rd best quarterback in the SEC, which so many people did not agree with. And this is kind of going to be my little moment of me bragging, but you look at the other guys who you look at as the best quarterbacks in all of college football. Sam Howell, 1 touchdown. 3 interceptions this weekend. You look at other guys like Spencer Rattler. You look at other guys like, who else could I mention? DJ Uiagalelei, who many people are like, oh, Heisman favorite. You look at a guy like JT Daniels. All of these are guys who you're like, oh, they're way better than Bryce Young. Why are you so high on Bryce Young? Bryce Young is terrible. Like, this kid hasn't even played a game yet. Not that they've said he's terrible. I don't know if you can hear about that, but the trains in Columbia here are terrible. And I got trains going off every single second, so please excuse the noise. But not saying that people say Bryce Young is a terrible quarterback, but everyone was like, this kid's so overrated. Let me read you his stat lines. 27 for 38, 344 yards, 9.1 yards per play, and 4 touchdowns with a 94.2 QBR. Welcome to the league, Bryce Young. And let's not remember, the Alabama wasn't just going up against some nobodies. They were going up against the Miami Hurricanes, who were ranked 14th in the nation, and Alabama was able to hang 44 points on them. Talk about the receiver core, because obviously when you talk about this receiver core, the main guys that pop into your head is obviously John Mechie, who did have a good game yesterday, 6 receptions, 76 yards for 1 touchdown in that game. But the guy who really stood out to me, Ohio State transfer Jameson Williams. Do you remember him? Do you remember that massive wide receiver room that Ohio State had? Where you look at guys like Chris Olave, who had an amazing game on Thursday night. Yes, that's when they played. You look at Garrett Wilson. You look at Jackson Smith-Njigba. You look at Julian Fleming. And there's this guy just named Jameson Williams kind of lingering around in that wide receiver room who people knew he had talent, but he's just not one of those names that pop into your head when you talk about the Ohio State wide receiver room. He transfers to Alabama. And could he have possibly had a better game for the amount of talent that Alabama wide receiver room has, the amount of talent that Bryce Young could have thrown to? Jameson Williams only got 4 receptions in this game, but he was able to average for 31.5 yards per catch with 126 yards and 1 touchdown in that game. And another guy that I want to talk about for Alabama, Cameron Latu, a guy that was talked amazing about in camp. So many people were high on him. He had an amazing game too. 3 receptions for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. So those were all the touchdowns that Bryce Young threw in this game. But I want to talk about this defense. Don't even bring up stats in this game, because Alabama's stats in this game, like, yeah, they were impressive and everything like that. But if you just watch the game, if you just took the time and even watched bits and pieces of the game, I'm not even going to lie, I couldn't watch all of the Alabama game because I was out tailgating and stuff like that. But I had it on my phone and I was watching bits and pieces of it. And even just turning it on for a second and just watching Alabama's defense go to work, it is truly a work of art. The amount of talent that they have, it's so easy for them to swarm to the ball. I feel like it is so easy for Alabama players to get to the ball, and they just finish tackles, and they finish tackles hard. Like, Miami was getting absolutely nowhere on the field. Miami was not scoring anything in the first half. All they put up was 3 points. Now, they did come out in the third quarter and put up 10. But other than that, you shut them out in 2 quarters. You only allow them to score 3 in the second, and then obviously allow them to score 10 in the third. But this Alabama defense, man, I talk about the 2 best defenses in all of college football. I'm talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, and I'm talking about the Alabama Crimson Tide, because the amount of depth that they have at linebacker, for example, when I talk about guys like Henry To'oTo'o, Jalen Moody, talk about guys like Christian Harris, Will Anderson, so much talent on Alabama. And I don't know why I constantly keep doubting Alabama, because they lose Mac Jones, they lose Devontae Smith, they lose Jalen Waddle, they lose him, 5-star, gone. They just reload each and every single season. And you focus too much on the players, but you forget the headman behind the whole scheme of Alabama football, and that is Nick Saban. And as long as Nick Saban is roaming the sidelines for Alabama, it just feels like Alabama is going to be one of the best teams in all of college football year in and year out. So that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. This Alabama team was probably the only team that impressed me more than Georgia, because, yes, Georgia played kind of a better defensive game than Alabama did, but this Alabama offense of Bryce Young, for his first start ever, going up in it was a big-time game. We can call it a big-time game. You're playing the 14th team in the country. It's a 3:30 game. First week of the season, you're playing in Atlanta, Chick-fil-A kickoff or whatever they call it. It's a big-time game. Go out there, throw a QBR of like 95 up. I think it was like 94.7, but he had an amazing game, 4 touchdowns. No complaints from Bryce Young. He looked absolutely amazing in that game, and he is going to continue. Well, Alabama goes out. I can't remember who they play next week. Let me pull it. They play Mercer next week, and then it's the big Florida game. So I think this Bryce Young and Alabama offense is going to be more than ready going into that Florida game, 110%. But Alabama's defense, Alabama really as a whole, impresses me year after year after year after year, guys. Like, it is really that amazing. Let's see. What is everyone talking about in the comments? Ole Miss versus Louisville pick. That is going to be played on Monday. I cannot wait for that game. I love Ole Miss's offense. Now, Lane Kiffin I'm pretty sure it just came out that he has COVID, which is not a good thing. You never want to hear anyone get COVID. Obviously, that's not good, but I wonder how that will affect Ole Miss in this game. But I still think Ole Miss wins easily. Like, what's the spread? If the Ole Miss is favored by 10 or so in this game, I still think Ole Miss is going to have one of the better offenses in all the SEC. I'm taking Ole Miss, and I'm taking Ole Miss. They're probably going to put up, I'm going to say Ole Miss is going to put up like 45 points in this game. I don't want to make it too high because, yes, it's still the first game of the season, but I do think that Ole Miss is going to be absolutely electric. So I go to the Northwestern game, and as soon as I sit down, Kenneth Walker did have a good game, and Michigan State really had a good game as a whole. Northwestern was not having it. When was that? That was a Friday night game. Jaden Harris, I went to the Carolina EIU game last night, and it was electric. I can say the exact same thing, my friend, because I was in the student section, and I was having the absolute time of my life. Great game for the Gamecocks. I can't talk about the Gamecocks on here. Again, I've talked about that, but I can talk about that atmosphere was absolutely electric last night. So, amazing game. I hope you had fun, Jaden, because Gamecocks games, having Gamecocks football back, nothing like it. Nothing like it. It was absolutely amazing. Great night game in Williams-Bright. Great night in general. It was just good weather out. It was great college football games on. I came back from a full day of watching college football. I went out tailgating and all that stuff. I sat in Bojangles and watched the Penn State-Wisconsin game. Then I went out for the Gamecock walk or whatever, watched a bit of the Alabama-Miami game, went into the stadium, watched Carolina EIU, came back here, finished the Clemson Georgia game, which I also kind of had on my phone in the stadium. And then I watched the LSU UCLA game. I think I watched a bit of football. Watched a bit of football. What's your thought on BYU Houston? BYU Houston. Do they play tonight? I got to check my schedule. There's been so many games going on. I can't keep up with everything. I mean, BYU and Houston, I really don't know all the much about both of those teams because I know BYU, they had an amazing season last year, but they don't have Zach Wilson anymore. I'm just going to tune into it. I'm just trying to tune into as many college football games as possible. But now UCF and Cincinnati. First of all, how did Boise State blow that lead against UCF? And what was that, Thursday night? Yeah, all the Thursday night games. I'm excited to see Cincinnati this year. I think Cincinnati was one of the most impressive games. If you look at all the top 10 teams, Cincinnati was a team that took care of business yesterday. I can't remember who they played, but I know they won against beat them by a substantial margin because you look at the rest of the teams, North Carolina lost. Notre Dame plays today. The 8th seed is Cincinnati. They took care of business. The 7th seed, Iowa State, was terrible. They only beat Northern Iowa, an FCS team, by 6 points. You had Texas A&M take care of business. You had Ohio State get a bit of a scare from Minnesota. You had Georgia obviously won. You had Clemson lose. You had Oklahoma get a massive scare from Tulane, and then you had Alabama win. So out of all the top 10 teams, I think Cincinnati was definitely one of the most impressive there for sure. Do you think that there should be any worry around Oklahoma considering they just struggled to beat Tulane? There's definitely worry. I'm definitely worried because I came out and said that they are my national championship pick, even though they're not an SEC team. And we talk about SEC football here. I did say Oklahoma was going to be my national championship pick. So I'm scared. I'm scared for Oklahoma right now, as long as they don't lose, because we kind of seen this every single year. Oklahoma usually starts out slow like this. They got to settle in. They got Nebraska next week. Now, Nebraska obviously lost to Illinois, but they went out and won yesterday. That might be a bit of a difficult game because I think Nebraska probably better than Tulane. So Oklahoma's definitely going to have to tighten things up, and they're definitely going to have to get better defensively. I think offensively they were fine for the first game, but it definitely could get better. But defensively, for the amount I talked about this defense, this Oklahoma defense, and how good they're going to be this year, definitely I need to see more from them for me to be confident. LA Tech gave Mississippi State a scare. Yeah, like what was that? A 1-point game? It was 35-34. Not a very good game for Mississippi State at all there. And then do you think VTech has a chance at winning the Coastal Division this year? If you take down North Carolina and they're really the team in the Coastal, I got to pull up my divisions because I can't even remember. The ACC is the one team that divisions always screw me up on. So who's in the Coastal? Yeah, like you look at the Coastal, Virginia Tech, you got teams like Miami and North Carolina. And other than that, you're going to have like Pitt, who I think could be decent. And other than that, Virginia Tech definitely has a chance. Definitely has a chance, considering they've already beat North Carolina. If they just go down and take out Miami, I think Virginia Tech's going to be an amazing spot going throughout the rest of the season. Okay, so with all that being said, we have been live for about half an hour now. Great show. I mean, the last couple of weeks, obviously, I've been moving into college and stuff and being busy, but I was so sick of the off season. Like, I really hit a spurt where I was just like, I feel like I'm just repeating myself constantly and saying the same thing because we've had no football to talk about. But now that football is back, I feel like I'm ready to explode. I've been talking to my friends and everything like that just about college football the whole time because we finally have something new to talk about. We have something new to talk about. And what we are going to talk about now, I'm going to get some water real quick. Lots of water. I drank lots of water yesterday. It was hot out in Columbia, I tell you that. But look at this. I got the LSU jersey on. Not necessarily because I'm an LSU fan. If you look at the guy on the back, I'll turn around for you real quick. Can you see that with the microphone? It says Joe Burrow with the Louisiana spelling. Back in the glory days of LSU football. Do you remember that? Do you remember 2 years ago where LSU became one of the most dominant teams that we've seen in all of college football? You obviously had Joe Burrow, quarterback. On the wings, you had guys like Jamar Chase. Look over there. There's Justin Jefferson. And in the slot, you got Terrace Marshall. And in running back behind me, oh, there's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And then you look at the defense. You got guys like Patrick Queen. Oh, look, there's Caleb Chase on. You got Derek Stingley out wide. You got guys like Grant Delpit. Man, LSU football is looking absolutely amazing. Remember that time when they won the national championship against Clemson? Remember the amount of recruiting fire that it looked like LSU was gaining? Look at the amount of talent that LSU was going to continue to bring in, and they were going to continue to be one of the best teams in all of college football for the next couple of years. If I fast forward you 2 years now and told you that last season, where did they go last season? 5-5. And I would have told you that they started the season 0-1 with a loss to UCLA. You probably would have said I'm crazy, because you probably would have said Coach O is one of the best coaches in all of college football right now. You're seriously telling me that he went after the season, he won the national championship. He goes 5-5 and opens up the season with a loss to UCLA. Well, that's what's happened. That's what's happened with LSU football. And I really, really, really don't know. It's honestly such a great mystery to me on why LSU is struggling so much, because on paper, I've said this, I've preached this for so long. On paper, LSU is still one of the best teams in all of college football. I will stand by that statement. The amount of talent that they got on that team on both sides of the ball, I got no problem in coming out here and saying that LSU still on paper, if you take talent for talent, you go up player for player, match them up against any other team, LSU's looking like one of the best teams in all of college football. There's no question about it. No one can prove me otherwise that LSU does not have the talent to be an elite football program this year. So why are they not an elite football program? We'll take a look at some of the stats from yesterday. LSU obviously traveled to UCLA. Now, I don't want to go too hard on LSU here, because if we take into account what they had to go through the hurricane and everything, obviously the hurricane hit Louisiana pretty hard, and they had to travel all the way out to Houston to go practice there. So obviously the game week experience was kind of different. You had to move to a new place, and then you got to travel all the way across the coast. Now, I can't really use the traveling to an away game as an excuse, because if you're a good football team, you got to win on the road anyways. But moving with the hurricane and everything like that, I'm not saying that that was an easy thing at all. So obviously that could have played some effect into what LSU was doing. But LSU offensively, in my opinion, there wasn't really any problem in the passing game, because Max Johnson went out there threw 26 for 46, threw 330 yards, 3 touchdowns for 1 interception. And then Kayshon Boutte is obviously one of the best players in all of college football at the wide receiver position. 9 receptions, 148 yards for 3 touchdowns with a long of 45 in that game. He averaged 16.4 yards per catch yesterday. Kayshon Boutte is still going to be one of the best wide receivers in all of college football. I think Max Johnson had a decent game yesterday. Other than that one pick, he was really, really good in that game. So I think passing-wise, LSU was fine yesterday, and this offense will continue to be fine as they go into, I'm pretty sure they play McNeese State next week. I could be wrong. Yes, they do. Look at me. Look at me remembering my schedule and everything like that. But you look at this LSU rushing game, and that's where I think you would go back 2 years ago and you look at what you had on the offensive line, and you look at who you had in the backfield for LSU, obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire. LSU only rushed for 49 yards last night, where you look at what UCLA was able to rush for, 210. That's a bit of a difference. Now, LSU did outpass UCLA, but that was only 330 to 260. When you're talking about 210 to 49, there's a bit of a difference gap there, a huge difference gap there. So I think LSU's rushing game is really going to be a main point of focus this season for something that's got to get better if you want to go in and win these big-time SEC games. Like, let's not forget, this LSU team still has to go up and play teams like Florida this year. They still got to go up against Alabama, got to go up against Auburn. They got to go up against all these guys. And if you can't run the football, it's going to be a tough year for LSU. So I think that that's one thing, a point of focus that definitely has to get better. Again, I've said it. LSU, passing-wise, I still think that they're going to be a good team in the SEC passing-wise. I think Max Johnson still is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in all the SEC. I stand by that statement. He showed it yesterday. He played a good game on the road, and obviously Kayshon was a huge target for him. But other than that, Trey Palmer had 7 receptions for 47 yards. Jeray Jenkins had 3 for 46. Moore had 3 for 32. And then other than that, kind of dipped off there. But those were your main receivers last night. What the real struggle for LSU is defense. That was the problem last year. On paper, I still stand by this. On paper, LSU has one of the best defenses in all of college football. Take that of what you will. But LSU still has one of the best defenses in all of college football on paper. I will say it one more time. LSU has one of the best defenses in all of college football on paper. But if we look at the stats from last night, especially defensive line, because I raved about this defensive line in the preseason, they got rushed on, and they got rushed on hard for 210 yards. You look at some of the individual box scores for UCLA rushing. Zach Charbonnet looks like he's one of the Heisman favorites right now, if I'm being dead serious. He had an amazing game against Hawaii last week, and last night he rushed for 11 carries for 117 yards, 10.6 average, and 1 touchdown. Zach Charbonnet has gone back to UCLA. He initially transferred from Michigan. He went back home to UCLA. He has done absolutely amazing so far for UCLA. Bottom line, Zach Charbonnet has gone into UCLA and done absolutely amazing. But if we're talking about LSU's D-line, the one that I rave so much about, they gave up 210 yards. It's as simple as that. That was a killer for this game. When UCLA was just able to rush the football, what can LSU really do? When you establish a rushing game, what can you really do defensively? Now, the secondary, I honestly didn't think did terrible for LSU yesterday, but for the talent that they have on there, still they gave up 260 yards, and they gave up 16.3 yards per pass last night. They did get a pick last night, so I think the secondary was decent. It wasn't a main point of concern that I'm like, yo, this LSU secondary with all the talent that they got, and they did terrible last night, that's the reason why they lost. I don't think the secondary was the reason that LSU lost here. It was decent, but I still think there's some points where they could have tightened up a bit more. Third down efficiency, LSU converted 6 of 15 offensively, and defensively, they let up 3 for 13. That is obviously going to be a huge, huge, huge point of concern. When you're giving up 7 first third downs in a game for 13, and the other team's over 500 for first downs, is a huge point of concern, especially when you're only able to go 6 for 15. That puts you at just over 333, because 5 for 15 is going to put you at 333. Average for third down efficiency. What's the next steps for LSU? What's the next steps for Coach O? Is Coach O on the decline? Is Coach O on the hot seat now? Is LSU really deteriorating before our very eyes? I don't know. We can't judge too much on the first game. I know that there's a lot to talk about with LSU. It's the first game. I got to calm down because, yes, I came out here pretty hard against LSU, which LSU is a team that I honestly love cheering for. I wouldn't have an LSU jersey if I did not enjoy watching LSU football. But I don't want to overreact too much for the first game, but defensively is where the problems got to come from. I mean, Coach Jones, you obviously had Bo Pelini last year. That did not work out at all. You could bring in Coach Jones this year. First game was rough. Something's got to change defensively. You got to switch up new schemes. You just got to be able to slow the run down first and foremost. I think you got to be able to slow the run down in this secondary. I think you just got to produce more turnovers. For the talent that you have on this defense, if you go back to that 2019 season, this LSU team was forcing turnovers left, right, and center. It was as simple as that. They were turning the ball over all the time. You forced 1 turnover in this game, but I feel like just defensively, the amount of firepower that you had in that 2019 season and the amount of turnover so that they were able to produce last season is just kind of felt lost. It's kind of felt lost, and just the same firepower and the same energy and everything that they brought to that defense in 2019 just kind of feels different. Just kind of feels different for LSU. So what's next for LSU? If we take a look at the schedule, obviously I said it before, they play McNeese State next week, then they go out and play Central Michigan, and then you travel to Mississippi State, and then your first big test other than UCLA, I say, when Auburn comes into town on October 2nd. Obviously, Auburn beat you pretty good last year, so that's a game that you got to get prepared for. I don't know how Auburn's offense is going to look because obviously we saw them play very well against Akron yesterday, but we got to see Auburn go to Penn State to really get a feel for what this Auburn offense is going to be all about. But LSU right now, they got to get on track defensively. So in that McNeese State game, in that Central Michigan game, even in that Mississippi State game, you got to limit the points that you're allowing to score, because when you go up against guys like Auburn, when you go up against Florida, when you go up against Ole Miss, when you go up against Alabama, when you go up against Texas A&M, they are going to be able to score the football. And if you cannot stop them from doing that, you're not going to win any games this season. It's plain and simple as that. So that is going to be the show for today, guys. I will take some final questions before we wrap it up today. First of all, lots of viewers. We are averaging, I think we got 12 now. Great. I appreciate each and every single one of you guys for coming in and talking SEC football. So if you guys got any questions, we got Caben Clark How about them dogs? How about them dogs indeed? I was the biggest Georgia Bulldogs fan last night. I can't say that I'm the same today, but last night I was bleeding black and red for sure. So thank you, Georgia Bulldogs, for beating Clemson. The Gamecocks won. Clemson lost. When was the last time you could say that? I don't even know. It was probably like 2013 when we beat them, but what a great night. Who's my Heisman favorite right now? Great question from Tyler. If I had to choose a Heisman favorite right now in this current point in time, Bryce Young. I don't see how it's not Bryce Young right now for looking at what he was able to do last night and looking at all the other guys who were the Heisman favorites coming into this season. Bryce Young has to be that guy right now. It's as plain and simple as that. He's going to be the Heisman favorite. And I honestly, like I say, Zach Charbonnet, but if he's able to keep up his production, who knows what happens there. But other than that, JT Daniels, it's not fair to kick him out of the conversation completely, especially going up against the Clemson defense. You just got to give him a game to have an offensive game, and then Georgia will be back on track. I think JT Daniels squeaks back into that conversation. But you look at Matt Corral, still haven't seen him play yet, so that's definitely up there. Cayman Clark says, I was the second biggest Georgia Bulldogs fan last night because he is the biggest fan. I'll give you that. I don't want to say that I'm the biggest Georgia Bulldogs fan when I hate them at the same time, but I was a huge Bulldogs fan last night. I had an amazing time watching them. Great defensive game. Really, the whole everyone in South Carolina yesterday, everyone was cheering for Georgia. So great win for Georgia. Thoughts on Stroud if you watched that game? I did watch that game. I had way too many thoughts on that game. CJ Stroud did not seem like the guy for Ohio State. The amount of overthrows in that game, he was missing left, right, and center. He was overthrowing his guys way, way, way too much in that game. And he just had some awful, and I mean awful interceptions in that game. It just seemed, I don't want to say out of character, but for how everyone was talking about CJ Stroud and how good he was going to be, it was a bit of a letdown. I'll take one more question. We got Tyler saying, is Washington in trouble? I think they are. I don't know, because I keep telling, obviously, Bernie, my partner on this channel, he's a big Michigan fan, and I told him all throughout the offseason, Michigan's going to lose to Washington week 2. Michigan's going to lose to Washington, and Washington obviously goes out last night and loses to Montana. So I think Washington is in trouble, especially losing to an FCS team. First of all, the rise of the FCS teams, because I think 3 of them beat Power 5 teams yesterday or something like that, because Vandy lost, Washington State lost, and then there was another FCS team who beat I can't remember. There's so much that happened last night that there's too many games, but that's going to be the show for today, guys. I'm going to end it there. We obviously had Georgia go out, have a massive win. Alabama played really well, and then I obviously touched on LSU and what is going on there, what's going on with Coach O, and how they got to get better. So, guys, thank you for tuning in. I plan to go live again on Tuesday. Please come out for that. I think I'm going to do my SEC picks again for next week. We're going to probably talk some Ole Miss too. I want to talk about how I see Ole Miss after that Monday game. We got another college football game today. Do not forget about that, because Notre Dame and Florida State do play. So go have an amazing time watching that game. I hope you had an amazing weekend. I hope you had as much fun as me this weekend, because I have had an absolute blast, and the weekend's not over yet. Again, we get the Monday off and everything like that. Is going to be a great weekend. So, guys, thank you. I love you guys. Comment, subscribe, keep watching, go college football, and come back next time.